Imagine finding this 2,000-year-old letter just tucked away in some dusty archive. You read the opening lines, and the tone is it's incredibly urgent.
Yeah, frantic almost.
Right. The writer is practically begging the people reading it to wake up,
Mm,
warning them that they're in this imminent mortal danger. But then you flip to the end to see who sent it, and the signature is just completely missing.
it's gone, yeah.
You don't know who wrote it, you don't know exactly who they're writing to, and you are just left holding this masterpiece of ancient text. It's like trying to piece together a life or death puzzle.
It really is. And that is the exact situation we're dealing with today. We're looking at a document that just completely defies our modern expectation for a neat and tidy backstory.
Yeah, we want the who, what, when, where right at the top.
Exactly. But this is a historical and theological enigma. It's arguably the most difficult, most mysterious book in the entire New Testament, the letter to the Hebrews.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because statistically, less than 1% of Christians call Hebrews their favorite book.
I mean, I'm not totally surprised by that.
Right, it can feel incredibly dense. It's almost like stepping into an advanced college seminar halfway through the semester.
You feel like you miss the prerequisites.
Yes. But for this deep dive, we are synthesizing some incredible historical analysis to help us out. We've got lectures from Bible teacher David Pawson. We've got these really detailed structural breakdowns of the text, and we're using all this to decode the mystery.
It's a great collection of sources.
It is. Our mission today is to discover why this ancient letter, as difficult as it is actually a masterclass in leaving behind safe, comfortable religion for true spiritual substance.
And to really grasp the gravity of that message, we have this striking visual illustration from the sources that just captures the entire thesis of the letter.
Yeah, it really sets the tone for everything we're about to explore.
Do you want to describe it for everyone listening?
Yeah, so for you listening, it's this incredibly vivid, powerful image. On the left side, you have this ancient Jewish temple. It's dark, it's heavy with this thick incense smoke, and you see a massive golden menorah.
Very atmospheric.
Right. And there's a priest with his back turned, facing an altar. But walking away from all of that, right down the center of the image, is Jesus.
Just leaving it all behind.
Exactly. He is physically walking out of the smoke and the darkness of that temple, and he's heading toward this sunlit landscape with a cross on a hill. And hovering right over the image is the phrase, leaving shadows for substance.
Leaving shadows for substance. I mean, that concept is the absolute beating heart of Hebrews.
It really is.
But, you know, to understand why the author is so desperate for his readers to step out of those shadows, we first have to play detective. We have to look at the tension driving the letter, which means solving this biblical cold case of who actually wrote it.
Which is so funny because the King James Version famously just slapped the Apostle Paul's name right on the title.
Oh, yeah, the Epistle of Paul, the Apostle to the Hebrews.
Right. But modern linguistic analysis makes that highly unlikely, doesn't it?
Yeah, extremely unlikely. See, Paul wrote his letters in Koine Greek, which was essentially the street Greek of the Roman Empire.
Like everyday working class language.
Exactly. It was rough, it was direct. But Hebrews, on the other hand, is written in this breathtaking, highly sophisticated classical Greek. It's clearly the work of someone with a very elite, formal education.
So it's a completely different voice.
Completely different. And that linguistic reality has led scholars to guess other prominent early church figures. Some suggest Barnabas, since he was the son of encouragement, and the letter calls itself a word of exhortation.
Makes sense.
Right. Others guess Apollos, given his reputation as this brilliant Old Testament scholar. There's even a theory out there that Priscilla wrote it, and she left her name off so the letter wouldn't be rejected by, patriarchal audiences.
Oh, wow. That's an interesting theory.
It is. But when you compile all the internal clues from the text, a much more compelling suspect emerges.
Silas.
Yes, Silas.
When you look at his resume from the sources, he just fits the profile flawlessly.
He really does. Silas was a close companion to Paul, meaning he intimately understood Pauline theology.
Which explains why it sounds a little bit like Paul sometimes.
Right. And he also served as an amanuensis, a literary secretary for Peter, helping draft his epistles. But crucially, Silas was a Jew steeped in the Hebrew scriptures, while also being a Roman citizen who possessed that elite classical Greek education we see in the text.
So he could navigate both Jerusalem and Rome seamlessly.
Exactly.
But even without a signed confession from Silas, the text itself has this internal evidence that acts as like a definitive timestamp. It tells us exactly when this crisis was unfolding.
What's fascinating here is how the author refers to the temple in Jerusalem. He writes about the daily sacrifices and the priesthood in the present tense, like as an ongoing active operation.
Which is a huge clue.
Massive, because historically we know the Roman army, led by Titus, completely obliterated the Jerusalem temple in AD 70.
So this text absolutely had to be written before that catastrophic event.
Yes. But there's another clue. The author makes a very specific comment about the suffering of the audience.
Right. He praises them for enduring public insult and having their property confiscated for their faith.
But he explicitly notes that they have not yet resisted to the point of shedding blood.
Meaning they haven't faced mass martyrdom yet? Nobody's being executed en masse?
Exactly, which points us directly to the mid-60s AD. We are sitting right on a historical powder keg here. Around AD 64, Emperor Nero's reign just descends into total madness.
Oh man, Nero.
Yeah, he blames the devastating Great Fire of Rome on the Christian population, and the brutal state-sponsored executions begin. So the match has been struck, but the bomb hasn't fully detonated for these specific readers quite yet.
And that brings us to the audience themselves. Historical context suggests that these were Jewish Christians living in Rome, which had a massive Jewish population at the time, roughly 80,000 people.
That's a huge community.
It is. But the critical detail the sources point out is that these were second-generation believers. They weren't the ones who originally heard the gospel directly from the apostles. They inherited this faith.
And inherited faith often lacks those deep, stabilizing roots of firsthand conviction. These believers were suffering from severe spiritual fatigue.
They were just tired.
Very tired. They had intellectually left traditional Judaism, but they hadn't fully, robustly committed to the radical demands of following Christ in a hostile empire.
There is an incredible analogy from the sources for this specific spiritual state. The cold water swimmer.
Oh, I love this one.
Right, it's so good. So imagine a group of people at a swimming pool where the water is just absolutely freezing. You have the fully committed ones who take a running leap, plunge into the deep end, come up gasping and yell, "It's wonderful, come on in."
But the Roman believers receiving this letter are the other group.
Yeah. They are the ones who slowly climb down the metal ladder until the freezing water hits right at like the top of their chest, the plimsoll line.
The plimsoll line, yeah.
And they just stop. They stand there on the ladder, shivering and looking utterly miserable. They refuse to take the plunge and actually swim, but they also haven't climbed back out.
They're just stuck.
They are paralyzed halfway between two worlds, one foot in their old Jewish traditions and one foot in their new Christian identity.
And we really have to understand the immense socio-political pressure keeping them paralyzed on that ladder. It wasn't merely theological laziness. I mean, it was a desperate matter of survival.
Life or death.
Truly. In the Roman Empire, religion was strictly regulated. Judaism was officially classified as a religio licita, a legal, registered, state-approved religion.
So it was safe.
Exactly. As long as you paid your taxes, you could practice Judaism safely without having to sacrifice to the Roman emperor.
Christianity, however, enjoyed zero protection. Because Christians worshipped a crucified man and refused to participate in the imperial cult, the Roman state viewed them as a subversive, illegal secta religio illicita.
So imagine the psychological toll. You have already had your property seized by the state. You're hearing these terrifying rumors about Nero's impending crackdowns.
And you're just freezing on that ladder.
The temptation to simply step backward up that pool ladder, to quietly slide back into the culturally approved legal safety of the local synagogue, was overwhelming. You could avoid the friction, escape the persecution, and stay alive.
Which is why the author of Hebrews is writing this letter in a state of sheer panic. He is effectively shouting, do not go back, do not get out of the pool.
Yes.
But to stop them from retreating, he knows a simple pep talk won't work. He has to fundamentally shatter and rebuild their entire view of reality. And to do that, he fuses two intensely different ways of thinking, starting with a deeply Hebrew concept that makes modern readers like us incredibly uncomfortable.
Blood sacrifice.
Yeah, blood sacrifice. Modern society has a really intense aversion to it. We demand a highly sanitized religion.
We really do. And David Pawson highlights this disconnect so vividly in his lecture. He describes an experience he had in Brazil. He walked out of his compound early one morning and just stumbled upon the remains of a black magic ritual in the street.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, broken bowls, sacrificed cock rolls, and even dogs. He described the profound physical and spiritual revulsion he felt looking at that scene.
It's visceral because we buy our meat shrink wrapped in pristine plastic at the supermarket. We keep the abattoirs hidden miles outside of town. We are entirely insulated from the visceral reality of death.
Completely insulated. But in the ancient world, that scarlet thread of sacrifice was the undisputed center of the relationship between humanity and the divine.
The author of Hebrews forces his readers to confront the fact that human evil and divine justice cannot be reconciled without the severe, costly reality of shed blood.
You can't understand the cross without it.
But here's the challenge, though. If the author is writing to educated Roman Jews who have been marinating in Hellenistic Greco-Roman culture their entire lives, how does a bloody Hebrew altar resonate with them? How do you successfully map ancient Levitical slaughter onto sophisticated Roman philosophy?
Well, that synthesis is the absolute genius of the letter to the Hebrews. The author takes the visceral Hebrew reality of the temple sacrifices and maps it perfectly onto a prevailing Greek philosophical framework.
Plato's theory of forms, right? Or shadows.
Exactly, Plato's shadows. But this requires a big shift in how we think about what is real.
Yeah, because to a modern Westerner, physical objects like a wooden table, a cobblestone street, or, the phone you were listening to this on, they feel solid and real, while the spiritual realm feels like a foggy, abstract dream.
But the Greek philosophical mind believed the exact opposite. For them, the physical, visible world was temporary, perishable, and ultimately inferior.
So the physical table isn't the real table.
Right. A physical table is just a decaying copy of the perfect eternal idea of a table that exists in the invisible realm. The heavenly realm is the solid reality, and the earthly realm is just the fog.
Which connects perfectly back to that visual we described earlier. The author of Hebrews applies this Greek logic directly to the Jewish religion. He tells them that massive physical temple in Jerusalem, the gold menorah, the earthly priests, the burning incense, the daily blood of bulls and goats, those were never the ultimate reality.
No, they were just physical shadows.
Right, they were earthly copies of a heavenly blueprint.
And the author is arguing that Jesus didn't just participate in the earthly shadow system. He brought the actual invisible eternal substance straight down from heaven. He's the reality that cast the shadow in the first place.
Leaving shadows for substance.
Exactly. So the plea to the readers is highly logical. Why would you retreat to the fading shadow when the eternal substance is standing right in front of you?
It completely revolutionizes how you read the Old Testament. The sources use this great analogy of trying to put together a complex jigsaw puzzle. Oh, that's a brilliant way to look at it.
Right. When you dump the pieces on the table, it's just chaotic. You have hundreds of disconnected fragments, a patch of blue sky here, a piece of a face there. None of it seems to fit together. And the Old Testament, with its various laws, prophets, and rituals, is that collection of pieces.
But Jesus is the picture on the lid of the box.
Yes. Once you look at the lid, all those fragmented pieces suddenly make perfect sense. You see how the sacrifices, the kings, and the prophets all lock together to form one cohesive image.
And crucially, once the puzzle is fully assembled, you don't sit there obsessing over the individual pieces anymore.
You don't need to.
Right. You have the completed picture. You don't need the fragments when you have the whole.
The author drives this transition from the fragmented pieces to the complete picture using one specific word repeated 13 times throughout the letter.
Better.
Yes, better, or, depending on your translation, superior. He systematically walks through centuries of Jewish history and proves that Jesus supersedes every single pillar of their faith. He starts with the prophets, right? The prophets were revered, obviously, but they only delivered God's message in fragmented, localized pieces. Jesus is the final, complete word.
Then he moves to Moses and Joshua.
Right. Moses was incredibly faithful, but he was ultimately just a servant in God's house. And Joshua led the Israelites into the physical promised land, but they never found true spiritual peace there. Jesus, on the other hand, offers an eternal internal rest for the human soul that a plot of land in the Middle East could never, ever provide.
Then the author tackles the most sacred institution of all, the priesthood. And the contrast he draws here is profound. Under the Old Covenant, earthly priests had to stand up all day, every day, offering the exact same animal sacrifices repeatedly.
Because there were no chairs in the inner sanctuary, their work was literally never finished.
Human sin was continuous, so the slaughter was continuous, but Jesus offers himself as the ultimate flawless sacrifice once. And then the text notes a crucial detail. He sat down.
He sat down at the right hand of the throne.
The work of atonement was definitively finished. No more blood needed to be shed.
Which brings us to one of the most unique and complex theological arguments in the entire New Testament. The author declares Jesus as the true high priest, but not from the traditional Levitical bloodline.
Right?
He says Jesus is a priest in the order of Melchizedek.
Okay, let's define that, because Melchizedek is a deeply mysterious figure. He pops up briefly in the book of Genesis to bless Abraham and then just vanishes. He has no recorded genealogy, no beginning of days, and no end of life in the text.
By linking Jesus to Melchizedek, the author is bypassing the temporary earthly priesthood entirely. Think about the Latin word for priest pontifex. It translates literally to bridge builder.
Bridge builder, I love that.
It's very descriptive. An earthly priest's job was to build a temporary bridge between a holy God and a fractured humanity. But those priests were flawed. They had to offer sacrifices for their own sins before they could help anyone else, and eventually they died. The bridge kept collapsing.
But Jesus, being fully divine and fully human, possesses what Hebrews calls an indestructible life. He builds a permanent, eternal bridge. He doesn't just mediate the connection, he is the connection.
And that leads to a profound category shift.
Yeah.
It is not merely that Jesus is a highly upgraded, better version of the prophets or the priests. Angels, Moses, the high priest, they were all fundamentally servants. Jesus is the Son.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Having the Son is infinitely better than having a servant.
Absolutely.
If you want to know the true intentions of a massive corporation, you could ask an entry-level employee, or you could ask the founder's child. The Son carries the actual authority, the inheritance, and the very DNA of the Father. A servant manages the house, the Son owns it.
This raises an important question, though. Soaring theological rhetoric about Melchizedek and Platonic shadows is beautiful, but theology is useless if it remains purely academic.
Right, it has to apply to their lives.
Exactly. The author of Hebrews isn't writing a textbook for a seminary. He is writing a tactical rescue manual for people in crisis. He takes this high-minded philosophy of substance over shadows and weaponizes it into urgent life-or-death warnings.
Because he understands that the most pressing danger for these Roman believers isn't that they're going to wake up one morning and violently, publicly curse God.
No, it's not a sudden rebellion.
The danger is much more subtle. The danger is drifting. Think of a small boat resting in a harbor, untied from the dock. The water is calm. You don't feel the boat moving at all. But you look up an hour later, and the current has silently pulled you miles out to sea.
And drifting is entirely passive. It requires zero effort. Because of this creeping apathy, the tone of Hebrews oscillates wildly between terrifying alarms and gentle encouragement.
It's like whiplash sometimes.
It really is. On one hand, you have the severe warning in Hebrews chapter 6. It speaks of individuals who have been enlightened, who have tasted the heavenly gift and shared in the Holy Spirit, and who then casually fall away.
That's a heavy passage.
It's very heavy. The author delivers a chilling verdict, stating it is impossible to restore them to repentance because they are actively crucifying the Son of God all over again.
It is the theological equivalent of throwing a bucket of ice water on a sleeping person. It's meant to shock them awake.
But immediately alongside those severe warnings, you find some of the most tender, inviting language in the New Testament. The author repeatedly uses the wooing phrase, let us. Let us draw near with a true heart. Let us hold fast the confession of our hope. Let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. It is a brilliant psychological combination of a severe warning siren and an incredibly warm embrace.
And that combination is precisely calibrated to cure their specific disease, second-generation stagnation. These believers were trying to survive on the spiritual momentum of their parents and mentors.
Which you just can't do.
No. The author bluntly tells them that by this time they ought to be teachers, but instead they need someone to feed them basic spiritual myth again. They need to move on to solid food. It's like a slow bicycle race.
That is the perfect mechanical analogy for this spiritual dynamic.
Right. If you've ever seen a slow bicycle race, the objective is to cross the finish line last, moving as slowly as possible without letting your feet touch the ground.
Which is incredibly hard.
Extremely. Occasionally, you see a master cyclist who can balance perfectly while entirely stationary. But for the vast majority of us, physics dictates a simple rule. If you start pedaling a bicycle forward, you don't just stay in one place, you crash, you fall over.
In the framework of Hebrews, you cannot simply balance in place. If you stop pursuing the substance, you inevitably fall back into the shadows.
And when spiritual momentum stops, human beings rarely become comfortable atheists.
No, instead they become deeply, obsessively religious.
So what does this all mean for someone listening to this today? I mean, most of us are not first-century Roman Jews weighing the political benefits of returning to a religio licita to avoid Nero's wrath.
Thankfully.
Yeah, thankfully. So how does this ancient critique of religion land in the modern world?
It lands by exposing the human manufacturing of religion as a cheap substitute for true spiritual intimacy. Analysis of these cultural trends reveals a consistent pattern. Often, it is those whose internal faith has grown cold who clamor the loudest for external religious ritual.
They want the visible stuff.
Right. They demand the ornate vestments, the burning incense, the massive cathedrals, and the rigid, predictable ceremonies. The technical term for this from the sources is sacerdotalism, or what some critics refer to as high churchianity.
It's basically a defense mechanism.
Yeah.
If you lack the invisible substance of faith, which Hebrews famously defines in chapter 11 as the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen, then you feel a desperate psychological need to surround yourself with physical, visible copies to validate your spirituality.
You cling to the tangible shadows because the internal substance has evaporated.
Precisely. Hebrews is a radical, uncompromising call to abandon the copies. You don't need to venerate a physical stone altar in a building on earth when your eternal high priest is currently alive, mediating on your behalf in the actual throne room of heaven.
And this ongoing mediation is why theologians frequently refer to Hebrews as the fifth gospel. The books of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John document the historical narrative of what Jesus accomplished during his physical ministry on earth.
But Hebrews pulls back the cosmic curtain.
Yes, it reveals what Jesus is actively doing right now as our high priest. It completely shifts where we focus our attention. The author's closing argument is effectively a demand to change your gaze.
Stop staring at the fragmented puzzle pieces.
Stop obsessing over the architecture of the earthly temple. Stop measuring your own inadequate spiritual performance. Look entirely to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith.
Strip off the unnecessary weights that are slowing you down. Climb out of the freezing halfway water of the shallow end and run the marathon that is set before you.
If we connect all of this rich history to the bigger picture for you today, we really have to circle back to the intense pressure those original Roman readers faced. They were shivering on the ladder of that pool, tempted to abandon their faith simply because Judaism was a religio licita.
It was legal.
It was legally protected, it was culturally acceptable, and it offered a safe, friction-free existence. It makes you wonder, what are the safe, culturally approved shadows that we actively cling to today just to avoid the friction and cost of standing firmly in the true substance of our convictions?
Man, that is a question worth wrestling with. We want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Hebrews. Keep exploring the text, keep pedaling forward, and whatever you do, don't settle for the copies. We'll catch you next time.